A former director of the French Foreign Intelligence Agency, DGSE, has made a remarkable statement about the reality of the UFO phenomenon, suggesting that it is interdimensional in nature and currently beyond the grasp of human understanding. In a new documentary titled UFOs, A Matter of States, Alain Juliette discusses the experiences and observations that have convinced him that some UFOs represent technologies from parallel worlds. Juliette, who also once served as senior economic intelligence officer to the Prime Minister, recently spoke to journalist David Ramassoul about his participation in the new documentary, which features scientists and politicians discussing the subject of UFOs. Juliette states his conviction that sophisticated UFOs, like those recently reported and filmed by US Navy pilots, are not of human origin. He believes that if such technologies were in use by any terrestrial government, details of these classified programs would have been leaked long ago, or else they would have come to light naturally through public scrutiny. He said, "We know that the Americans have launched a very serious study with a big budget to try to understand UFOs, and it seems that other great powers, in particular Russia and China, have done the same thing. Undoubtedly for the same reasons, to discover if there is not behind the UFO phenomenon something which, technically speaking, can be interesting." Despite these costly secret studies, says Juliette, some of the phenomena reported in UFO encounters are beyond our current comprehension and are likely representative of parallel worlds or different dimensions. He added, "A fly with its faceted eyes can see dimensions other than ours, even though it lives in our world. Perhaps there are therefore things that are in our universe that we cannot see in normal times because they are not in our field of vision. But perhaps from time to time something happens that a phenomenon passes through our field of perception before disappearing." But Juliette was quick to point out that he was not necessarily talking about alien life forms as we might typically conceive of them. "I'm not talking about little green men," he said. "I'm following the same approach as certain scientists and astronomers who simply say to themselves, 'Something escapes us.'" He added that, as we go from a worldview modeled by traditional physics to another vision based on quantum physics, we may understand these phenomena much better through the prism of quantum physics than that of our current physics. France actually has a long history of official UFO investigations. The country's space agency has an investigative arm whose purpose it is to investigate UFO phenomena and make its findings available to the public, which it has been doing for many years. But Juliette believes that it's been scrutinized by the French authorities, perhaps for fear of ridicule by the international scientific community, which he says has a hard time thinking outside the box. Juliette says that if international heavyweights like America and China would be bolder in their public statements about UFOs and more open about their research on the subject, other governments would follow suit. This isn't the first time a retired French official has spoken candidly on the UFO issue. In 1999, the French Institute of Higher Studies for National Defense, a military think tank, prepared a 90-page report detailing the results of an independent study on UFOs. The white paper, now commonly referred to as the Cometa Report, was compiled by a group of 13 retired top-tier generals, admirals, and government scientists, including the former head of the French Tactical Air Force, General Bernard Nolain, and the former head of the French Space Agency, André Lebeau. The report documented the existence of unidentified flying objects and their implications for national security. Copies were received by President Jacques Chirac and Prime Minister Lionel Jospin. The report concluded that, for a small percentage of UFO sightings, the extraterrestrial hypothesis was valid. It stated that some UFOs represent completely unknown flying machines with exceptional performances that are guided by natural or artificial intelligence, and noted that, although the extraterrestrial hypothesis has not been categorically proven, strong presumptions exist in its favor. The report then goes on to consider in detail the likely consequences of open extraterrestrial contact for politics, science, and religion. It's not only French defense officials who've spoken out on the UFO issue over the years. Let's take a look at some other notable statements from individuals in positions of influence. Roscoe Hillenkoetter. Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter became America's first CIA director in 1947, and before that was head of the Central Intelligence Group, CIG, and he had previously been wounded during an attack on Pearl Harbor and commanded the USS Missouri in 1946. He retired from military service with the rank of Vice Admiral. In 1960, in a letter to Congress, Hillenkoetter famously wrote, "Behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about the UFOs. But through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown flying objects are nonsense. To hide the facts, the Air Force has silenced its personnel." Victor Marchetti. Victor Marchetti served in the CIA from 1955 to 1969. Towards the end of his CIA career, Marchetti worked for several months as special assistant to CIA Deputy Director Rufus Taylor. Marchetti was also involved in establishing the top-secret Pine Gap satellite ground station near Alice Springs in Central Australia, long rumoured by UFO conspiracy theorists to be Australia's Area 51. In an article for Second Look magazine in May 1979, Marchetti raised eyebrows with the following statement. "I do know that the CIA and the US government have been concerned over the UFO phenomenon for many years, and that their attempts, both past and recent, to discount the significance of the phenomenon and to explain away the apparent lack of official interest in it have all the earmarks of a classic intelligence cover-up. My theory is that we have indeed been contacted, perhaps even visited, by extraterrestrial beings, and that the US government, in collusion with other national powers of the Earth, is determined to keep this information from the general public." Lord Hill Norton. One of the most high-ranking military officials, retired, ever to speak out on the UFO issue was the late five-star Admiral of the Fleet, the Lord Hill Norton, who served as Britain's Chief of Defence Staff and as chairman of the NATO Military Committee. Lord Hill Norton maintained a long-standing interest in UFOs during his later years. In his foreword for Timothy Good's best-selling exposé of government UFO secrecy, Beyond Top Secret from 1966, Lord Hill Norton wrote, "The UFO evidence is now so consistent and so overwhelming that no reasonably intelligent person can deny that something unexplained is going on in our atmosphere. There is a cover-up in the United States on a massive scale, in Great Britain, and in several other countries." Louis Elizondo. In December 2017, the New York Times broke a dramatic story. The American government had been operating a secret UFO study program between 2008 and 2012 called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, AATIP. The conclusions of the $22 million Pentagon project, which according to the Times continues quietly to this day, were that aircraft of apparently unearthly origin are routinely penetrating America's airspace. The man who headed the Pentagon UFO project, Louis Elizondo, told journalists that these aircraft, or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, were performing maneuvers that fly in the face of our known laws of physics. Even more shockingly, Elizondo revealed that the Pentagon has been recovering bizarre metal alloys from alleged UFO crashes, which currently are being studied and stored by billionaire defense contractor Robert Bigelow. Discussing the Pentagon UFO project live on air in December 2017, Elizondo told CNN, "We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous types of aircraft. Let's call them aircraft. Things that don't have any obvious flight surfaces, any obvious forms of propulsion, and that have extreme maneuverability beyond the healthy G-forces of a human or anything biological. Hypersonic velocities, low observability, and positive lift seemingly define the laws of aerodynamics." When encouraged by the news anchor to speculate as to the nature and origin of these mystery aircraft, Elizondo replied, "We've deliberately stayed away from going down that rabbit hole of who's behind the wheel and what are their intentions. What we wanted to do was to let the data speak for itself." The anchor responded by nudging Elizondo again. "Let me ask you point blank the question. Do you believe that life from somewhere else, while you ran this program, came here, visited, observed?" Elizondo stunningly replied, "There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone." So there appears to be a broad consensus among the defense and intelligence officials cited here. UFOs are objectively real, albeit currently not fully understood by science. They are worthy at best of focused study and at the very least of sustained monitoring in the interests of aviation safety and national security. How long will it be, though, before any government makes the decision to speak with full transparency on the UFO issue? And will this lead to further statements by other governments around the world? For now, in the absence of an unambiguous official statement of disclosure by any government, we are left to follow the evidence whenever it presents itself and wherever it leads. If the words of Alain Juliet hold any truth, the evidence may lead us beyond not only the boundaries of our world, but of our dimension.